Welcome. You're listening to The Real Truth About You. And this is a show where we journey together to discover our true selves, who we really are under all those masks and all those things about life. And we discover who we really are, and we apply that to our life so that we can have an abundant, a blessed, and a very full life. My name is Will Sinclair, and I'm your host for today. And I gotta be honest with you, I sat and I thought to myself, okay, what is today's show meant to be about? Sometimes I come up with topics and I think, well, yeah, okay, maybe that may be a good topic, but I always feel like I'm divinely guided somehow, or, inspired in some way. And I thought about it and I thought about it, then I sat, and then I procrastinated, and then I didn't do it. And then I thought to myself about a podcast I did a few episodes ago, or a couple of episodes ago. It was called Just Do It. Don't wait, just do it. So I thought, you know what? I better follow my own advice. If I expect you to follow some of my advice, or at least listen to it, I should at least do that too. So here I am. And I'm going to talk today about whatever comes out of my mouth. And the thing that seems to come out of my mouth and into my head the most seems to be about breaking the cycle. We talk about our parents, and some of the things our parents did was really good. And we really admire our parents, and we put a lot of faith and trust in them. But sometimes some of the things our parents did were not perfect. They weren't good. They were hurtful, or they put us down, or they stripped away our self-confidence. And I want to tell you a little bit about my mother. She passed away in 2012. And I got to say, first up front, is that I love my mother dearly. But this is her background. She was born in Calcutta, India. She comes from Irish descent. I think her grandfather was an Irish soldier, a fusilier, I think they were called, and I think he was posted. The best story I've heard anyway from her family is so far, and the most concurrent or whatever story that they all seem to tell is that this soldier got posted to India, and with his wife, and they adopted an East Indian orphan boy who was 9 years old at the time, and of course he became Catholic, Christian, whatever they were. The last name became Riley. How else would you get somebody in India with the last name Riley? And that became my mom's dad. Her mom was Portuguese descent. Another family had come across at the same time, roughly, with a young girl. And the young girl and the young boy met, and eventually they had a family, a large family. And anyway, they were born into wealth. My mother was born into wealth because at the time when India was being ruled by the British government, I don't know what you would say. I mean, did they break the backs of the Indians that were there, the native Indians? Probably. But they definitely, if you were from that white descent, that British descent, then you definitely had the upper hand. You were in the upper class, and my mom's dad, my grandfather, was no different. And I guess he was in charge of British Rail. But anyway, my mother was sent to boarding school. That was the British thing to do. And in this boarding school that was run by the nuns, Catholic nuns at that time, it was basically, you're ruled by the rod kind of religion. And it was the kind of school where, the stories my mom would tell me are things like, if you wet your bed, which today we would just deal with, that's just the way it is. Kids do that. But back then, if you wet the bed, it was something that was to be purged from you and something you were meant to be humiliated about. And so she would have to carry a mattress on her head around in a circle so that everybody would know that she wet her bed and was trying to intimidate her into not doing it again. And whether you agree with that or not, I don't. But anyway, so that was the kind of childhood she grew up with. I think she had a good family, but like any family, a lot of dysfunction. And when the Gandhi government came into power and the British government had to move out, and anybody of British descent, which was, it would include my mother's family, and they had a large family. I think there was 14 siblings in their family. And they moved to England. And when they got to England, her dad died. My grandfather died. And her mom remarried. And the guy that she remarried apparently was already married and at the same time to somebody else. And he was a very, I don't know, wicked kind of guy, and a lot of abuse issues going on. And she apparently tried to, this is her story, and even her sisters, my mother tried to kill him in his sleep with a pair of scissors. Yeah, that's what I said. Try to kill him in his sleep with a pair of scissors. So you take that life and you bring it into a family. So she gets married, my mother gets married to my dad and starts having kids. And now you take all that and everything that hasn't been dealt with, like today, in today's age, we go through so much counseling and so much awareness, and there's so many things about life that just helps you to move ahead, right? But in her day, that's not what you did. You just plowed ahead. That was just life. And so you take all that and you pass all that down, and then I end up, and my siblings end up with a life that is a little bit more, I'd say, off normal, off color. I always thought my life was normal. My life was kind of like, my mom would bring in, if, a kid would act up, right, and start crying and blah, 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 and things like that. And you know what it's like as a parent, if you're a parent. And she would bring all the kids off the street, all my friends, to watch me cry. It was the humiliation technique that she'd learned. And so she passed that on. And I'm not blaming her, and I love her dearly now. But anyway, it was that kind of childhood. She would say, when I acted up, she would say she's going to call the police to come and take me away, and she would get on the phone and things like that. So all those kind of techniques, right? She just did not understand parenting for that in that realm. And I know in her older age, she realized some of the things that she'd done. So I'm not blaming her. What I'm doing is I'm trying to set the stage. So you have me, who grew up with a lot of anger inside and a lot of resentment and a lot of abuses that stripped away my self-confidence and just things that made me really angry. So when I got married, when I was 27 years old and I met my wife, Adrena, and I got married, I transferred all that anger and all that rage and what I thought was normal life, like mind games. And I used to punch holes in walls. I never hit Adrena at all, but I'm sure I scared her quite a few times. And so you take all that into that relationship, and how could you ever have a normal relationship? How could you ever have a normal marriage, if there's such a term as normal? I really thought my childhood was normal. I thought mind games was just a normal part of life. I thought anger that I didn't know where it came from was just anger, and I just would get mad. And I didn't even realize why I was getting mad. I would wake up on a Saturday morning just cursing and swearing because I was just so livid, so mad. But all the time, I was still a churchgoer. I was still going to church. And my mom used to take us to church all the time. I always used to say our home was a place where love and abuse coexisted at the same time. And my mom, I know she loved us. I know she loved us. And she loved us as best she could and raised us as best as she knew how. And it's just the way it was. But so you take all that and you transfer that now to my kids, right? But here's the thing. The thing that changed was something happened. And we had moved to Canada from Scotland because I was born in Scotland. And we'd moved as a family basically to Canada, at least myself, my sister, and my mom and dad, and my brother stayed behind. I was 21 years old when I came to Canada. And so we set up shop in Canada, set up our life in Canada. I get married, transfer all my anger and bitterness to my wife, thinking that's how you deal with life. And we went to visit my mother, and when we had little kids, and something happened, and my mother just blew up, and there was just a whole thing that was going on. And then 10 minutes later, it was like nothing else happened. And my wife said to me when we got back from visiting my mother, we were actually living in a few provinces over, so it was like a 4-hour flight. But when we got back home, my wife said to me, you know what? That is not normal life. That's not normal life. And for the first time in my life, I realized, oh, that wasn't normal life. And I remember being at work, and I worked in a department store / grocery store, and I was doing building maintenance, and I just wanted to curl up on the floor and bawl. And I didn't really know why. It was like a can of worms had opened. And I ended up going for, I called up this nun that I knew, and I went to my boss and I said, listen, I got to go for this session. And I went and I just spelled out my guts, spelled out everything, all the things that I felt I'd done wrong, or all the things, just whatever came out, came out. But from that, I ended up going to more counseling, and then more professional counseling. And when this nun felt that I was ready to move on, she recommended somebody else. And I went from one counselor to another counselor. And then eventually my wife went to counseling, and because she had issues she had to deal with from me and probably her own life. And then we went to like adult children. It's called Adult Children Anonymous, and it was for children who's been through abuse or alcoholic families or anything like that. And it's just open groups. And so we went to that as a couple, and we went to that for about a year. And then slowly, bit by bit, one thing and after the other, and just a lot of the issues that you've probably heard me talk about in previous podcasts. And the thing I'm coming to is, my wife said to me one day, thanks for breaking the cycle. And it just made me think about how things get passed down from generation to generation to generation. And bad habits, bad parenting, bad advice, things that some people thought they were doing in love, but they were actually hurting somebody else in the process. Ways that we taught our kids, hey, this is the real truth, where maybe it wasn't the best thing. I mean, the thing is, you can't beat yourself up because it is what it is. And as long as we grow, and I know a lot of you who are listening to this podcast are moving forward in your life. That's why you're listening to this podcast in the first place. And I guess it's like Bill Wilson from the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, says, I hope we grow through attraction rather than promotion. So I'm hoping also that this is attracting you. But anyway, the thing is you're moving forward. I was moving forward. And my wife said, thanks for breaking that cycle. And I realized that, yes, it had taken effort and it had taken a while. And I hadn't consciously thought of it. And I went through the process also of talking to my kids and knowing that I probably did things that hurt them. Mind games I maybe played with them, or things that I did that may have hurt or influenced them in the wrong way. And I apologized to them. And now I know I have a very good relationship. Even my son has gone through a process of forgiveness for me. And I'm not saying they never loved me, and I'm not saying it was always hardship for them or for me or whatever, but there are things that happen. And if you are willing as a person to go back to your kids, or go back to your spouse, your partner, your life partner, or to your friend from childhood and say, you know what, as long as it's not hurting them in the process of you doing this, but you go back and you say, you know what, I didn't treat you very good, or I didn't do something right, or I did stuff that I want to make amends for, I want to apologize for. And especially with your kids, it never hurts to apologize. And you can only control what you can control. You can't control what they do. You can't control what the other person does. But you can move forward to make amends. You can move your pride and your ego aside. And you can stop living from the I. Because they say when you move away from the I and you move towards others, you're creating a freedom. St. Francis was very much like that from Assisi. He gave his life that way to others, to lepers, to people who are suffering. But when you give your life to others, then you're gaining a freedom in yourself. When you move away from the I. So when you take away that pride, the arrogance, the ego, and you move out in humility and you say, you know what? I did something wrong. Or I think I did something wrong. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you just think you did, right? And you go to that person or you go to that child of yours and say, I'm sorry. Even if your kids are little. I had an incident with my granddaughter, and she was visiting. She's 7 years old, and she was visiting us. And she was actually, we live on a camp, like a kids camp. And right now there's a big fiddle music festival going on. And so she was part of that. She was learning fiddle. And she'd made some friends, and she was sitting on the porch of the house, and she did something, and her grandma says, my wife said, don't do that, do this, blah, blah, blah. And she didn't quite listen. She's a kid. She's 7 years old. And I got upset with her. I just kind of got upset with her on the porch in front of her friends, and she started to cry, went in the house. And then I realized that maybe I wasn't wrong in what I was trying to do, trying to correct her, I should say. But I was wrong in the way I did it. And so I went inside and I said, you know what, sweetheart, I'm really sorry that I embarrassed you in front of your friends. I could have easily brought you inside the house and then talked to you there. And I'm really sorry I brought it out and I put you down and embarrassed you in front of your friends. You don't deserve that. And she was fine with that. But if you're open to doing something like that, it's amazing the healing that happens, right? It's amazing the healing of the hurt that takes place immediately. And like I said, you can't control the other person. You can only control what you do. But you open that door and you walk through it. And that's it. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. So anyway, if you're in that position where you feel like you want to look back on your life, or you want to make amends, or there's somebody you know that you've hurt from even years and years ago, and you know that going to them might be difficult, but it won't hurt them for you to go to them, right? Sometimes we open up things even worse if we approach somebody, right? It depends on the situation, but you have to assess that. But when we do that, we're not only helping them, we're helping ourselves. So anyway, go ahead and break the cycle. If there's something happening in your life that you feel you need to break, go ahead and break that cycle. Put that pride aside. Take that ego and kick it out the door and go and break that cycle. It is a process. I guarantee you it's a process. It is not instant. It is not overnight. And sometimes it's not overnight for you to help going out and doing that. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it might take months, years. I don't know. Depends on your situation. But you take it one step at a time. Because every journey, every long journey, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And that's all you should be doing. One step at a time. One step at a time. And then when you look back, you'll see how far you've come. When I look at my life, sometimes I think, wow, I have got so much stuff to do in my life yet. I've got so much to work on yet. I thought I was here, but I'm not. And then when I look back, I can see where I was, and I can see where I am now. And I know there's been a difference. I know when my kids talk to me, there's been a difference. I know that despite things I may have done when I was younger as a parent or to friends or to people, there's a difference. When you heal, people around you begin to heal. And for me, I'm not saying you have to, but for me, I needed divine guidance for this. There's some things I just could not do, and I've mentioned before, I have a spiritual director, someone who guides me, someone who says, so where is God in all of this? What is God telling you in all of this? And for me, that is a strength. The strength I draw, that divine strength. So however you perceive God to be in your life, draw on that and allow that divine help, that grace, that energy, whatever you want to call it, to permeate through you. And you will be blessed, and those around you will be blessed. You may not see it in your lifetime. You never know. You may not see it in your lifetime. You may see it in your lifetime. The chances are high you will. So take that time and just learn to be you and accept you and love you. Don't put yourself down. Don't belittle yourself. Don't tell yourself how stupid you were. Don't tell yourself how stupid you think you are. Just be you, love you, embrace you. Imagine a loving creator wrapping his arms around you in love, because you are loved. Anyway, that's my message for today. So break the cycle, go out, put the pride aside, and just be love. Live love. Okay, thank you so much for listening today. My name is Will Sinclair, and you're listening to The Real Truth About You. You can get more downloads at therealtruthaboutyou.com. And I would love to hear from you. Our email is support@therealtruthaboutyou. That's support@therealtruthaboutyou. And you can email me directly through that email link, and I'll try and have it up on the website. It should be up on the website too, but we also have a contact form on the, if you forget what the email address is. But if you can you please promote this? Can you please give this podcast to somebody else? Can you bless them with it? If you need to, burn it onto a CD and give it to somebody, put it on the stick drive for somebody if they don't have the internet, or email the links to them. That would really help the message to get out. If you are touched by it, somebody else will get touched by it. I know I was touched by it because it's my own life. And so thank you so much for listening. I love you tons. And remember, have an awesome, awesome day, because you rock.